project I'm starting is to build a pretty large cabinet. It's about 80 inches tall, 20 inches deep and 16 inches wide. In my shop I've always had a tough time cutting 8-foot long sheet goods, and I got some ideas from others' videos to make a Tracksaw. I also included the parallel guides. You can see them there on the left, and they're actually held in place with magnets, which seems to work pretty well. I haven't finished the parallel guides because I'm a little dubious to their utility, and it's set up as you're looking at it to cut one of the sides of the cabinet carcass, which is going to be about 20 inches. And you can see the track as I made it is wide enough to be able to get a clamp on either end. And the body of the track is just a 5mm piece of underlayment, and the main runner is also a 5mm piece. A piece of pine on the back, and its main purpose is to hold the steel piece that is used for the magnets. The sled itself is made of 1/4-inch thick MDF. The two clips that hold the saw in place are just pieces of steel belted bent into a U. Simple bolts coming through. The two parallel guides are simply wood, and the stops on this end just blocks of wood with wing nuts. I thought these would help set up the track a little bit quicker and easier, but when it comes down to it, typically cutting on this side of the saw, this is the piece over here that I care about. So I'm typically measuring from the far side of the piece to this edge. And again, these are kind of on the waist side cut, so time will tell. But this magnet contraption seems to work pretty well. The latch is on, it stays latched. The magnets do a pretty good job of preventing it from going that way. Well, I'm happy to say my first cut was quite a success. The cut came out very straight and clean with no tear out on either of the sides of the cut. My one disappointment was it kicked up quite a dust storm. I'm going to have to give that some thought. Overall, very happy with it. So the dimensions are dependent on your saw. So you need to have a fence, and I'm limited to about a 1/4-inch stock to clear the motor, and that will give me a full depth of cut. I'm thinking in the future I may need to clamp this, so I'm going to need the guide to be a little bit wider. You might want to put a clamp somewhere out here. And this dimension for the motor seems to be around 2 3/4 inches. This dimension is 4 inches, so that brings me to about 6 3/4 inches, and then I'll probably need another inch for clamping. The entire guide is going to be in the order of 7 3/4 inches wide. So in order to be able to make a Tracksaw, you have to be able to get a long straight cut in sheet goods, and I have this 2-piece aluminum straight edge kit that I got at the local box store, and the case for it is a video that I made, and I invite you to go check that out. This is small and light, so it's kind of nice for its portability, but it's a little on the flimsy side, and whenever I use it I have to take great care to get a good cut out of it. So it's glued up, and this here I marked it. This is the factory edge, which I thought was the straightest thing. And I tried to corroborate before I move forward that this is indeed a straight edge. So one of the tricks I did was I ganged together 3 levels here with a couple clamps, and it started to indicate that I had a hollow kind of right here in the middle. I also broke out my straight edge that I've used before, and this also indicated that there was a hollow in the middle. So then I got out a string. I don't know how well you can see it, but it's just clamped to the very edge of the board here, and similarly down the other end here. Then you'd expect the string to be just overlapping the edge of the piece of plywood. And if I go to the middle and give you a shot straight down, this razor blade's just holding the string up a little. You can see that there is indeed a gap there. So despite my best efforts, this didn't come out as straight as I want. Line it up with a square here, and all the way down this end here, it seems as though my biggest problem is all the way down this end. I cut this away simply making several light passes against the straight edge using this knife. Didn't take very long. So I have the string suspended just on the very edge of the cleat here. And if I put the square against it, we're not hitting the string here. Down a couple more feet here, Still not hitting the string. Go down more or less in the middle. We're just barely hitting the string here. About 2/3 the way down. Not hitting the string. And over here, not hitting the string. So it seems as though along the full width, I might be around a half a string width in variation. This shows up here. It looks like it's around 1.5 tick marks. And those tick marks are around a 32nd of an inch. So it looks as though I may have a 32nd of an inch or so variation along 8 feet. I'm not going to get any better precision than that. I found this piece of scrap pine in one of my stashes. It has a heavy coat of primer on it which has to be removed. The easiest way for me to do it was cleaning it up with a hand plane. I started out using the number 4 and then I smoothed that out with the number 7. And I also took the time to joint the other edge. Didn't really need it, but once you're using a number 7, it's a lot of fun. And here I am just gluing it on and using plenty of clamps to hold it in place. I used a carbide scribe to mark the locations of the holes. Then I used an automatic punch to give me a little bit of a dimple exactly where I wanted. I had to come back and hit it pretty hard with a bigger, more sturdy punch. And I drilled a little bit of a pilot by hand so that I can now come to the drill press and drill the holes. If I pull it down and lean on it a little bit, that gives me about the right depth to get the proper countersinking for the screws. I'd pre-drill the hole with a self-centering bit and then drive the screw home. It's taken me about an hour to get this carriage to the point it's sliding pretty freely along the whole length. I set this up so that I can put the saw in the carriage where it'll work, or I can just ride it along this track and it'll still track along the same edge. I had a real tough time making the initial cut through this 5mm plywood while it was in the carriage here. And as I look down here in this gap, I see an awful lot of red marks and a little bit of burning. When the saw is riding on the sled has a zero clearance insert. A lot of friction between the blade and the side of the sled here. So it took me several shots of sanding more and more and more, and I think I have it to the point now where it's operating pretty well. The foam rubber that I glued to the bottom of the straight edge is giving me a couple problems. When I clamp it over here, it gives a little bit of a seesaw action, and it causes this edge to rise. So this straight edge is supposed to stop tear out here, and the fact that it's lifted up, the thickness of this rubber is kind of defeating that purpose. Here's an example of why I wanted to make this a track saw. During this test cut here, I was more focused on the speed of the blade and how the saw was performing, and not so much on keeping the saw tight up against the fence. And there you can see I came away from the straight edge and came off of the piece. So if this was a cut that I actually cared about, there's a chance I would have ruined the piece that I cared about. Well, the saw seems to be able to get through the 3/4 inch plywood without too much of a struggle. This cut here is very clean, and the other side of the cut, which are these scraps of wood, also very smooth, very clean. So I'm pretty happy with it. So here are the two pieces of the panel. The middle here, the two sides that I cut, and they're facing each other. The two outer edges are the factory edges. About a third of the way down, I have a gap that's around a 32nd of an inch, and up by the drywall square, there's a gap up there that's around a 1/16 of an inch. So the two pieces butted up against each other, I've got a total error probably on the order of a 32nd of an inch per side. I think that's pretty good. Well, I've used this track saw a couple times for the cabinet that I was telling you about, and I'm pleased to say it works really well. And I'm really happy now I have a good solution for making 8-foot long cuts. I also have this jig here. It's self-clamping guide, and it's made for the same circular saw. And I did a video some time ago on how I built this. And I also invite you to check that out. With these two systems, I now have a pretty good way of handling larger sheet goods in my shop. Well, you know, I always appreciate you stopping by and seeing what I'm up to in my shop. Thanks for coming. Please like, subscribe. I'll leave a comment, ask a question. You know, I love to read them. And I look forward to catching you all on the next one.